Welcome to the Blender Layout Overview. Now this is one of these things that most people when they open up Blender go, what do I do here? It is a very confusing interface if you haven't used 3D modeling packages before, and some of it isn't quite intuitive, but don't worry, we'll take you through it step by step now. So in this video, Blender looks the same on all platforms, and this is great. It does mean that whether you're working on a Mac, a PC, or a box running Linux, it will look the same. And you will see why that is. It's kind of its own self-contained environment, so it doesn't use the File, Edit, View, Tools window that you typically see on the top of most applications. I'll be going through how to switch and change layouts. It's a very cool feature where you can actually save a layout if you found one that you like working with, and of course you can immediately switch to it as well, so that's very, very powerful. Go through the main sections of the Blender interface, all the different window types you can have within this one interface, and how to move and change Blender's layout. It's a very powerful tool. And it's got lots of different variety that you can set up. And of course, we're all using different monitor sizes. Some of us are on a laptop. Some of us have got a whopping great big 4K monitor in front of us. So the way that you set up Blender will be slightly differently based upon this. So without further ado, let's hop on over into Blender. So welcome back into Blender, and the first thing that we're going to cover in this and the next lecture is the layout. So we'll start with a brief overview of the layout here to get you guys into it. It is a bit confusing for newcomers and old hats at 3D modeling. It is a completely unique interface. It allows massive amounts of customization, which is where some of the confusion can come from, because with all of that customization, all that power that you have, we need to learn how to control that. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of modeling, I know you're itching to start making stuff, but let's make sure that we understand the tool that we're using a bit better before we dive in and start modeling. Trust me on this, if you can't control the interface, it will bug you forevermore. So let's come on and have a look at the general interface here. So the very top, we can see it says File, Render, Window, Help, and we've got this area here that says Default. Now this whole area at the very top is an info header. We can change that, we can move it, that's the power of Blender. Unfortunately, if we move it and hide it away, it can be difficult to find again. But don't worry, we'll go over how to resurrect missing frames if we need to. So we've got 5 frames or windows on this particular screen. We've got the info header at the top. This big one in the middle is the 3D editor window. In fact, if we hover over the header bar's icon on the left hand side, we can see that it says the current editor type for this area is info. If we go down here, it would say the current editor type is 3D view. And then we can go down here and this will be timeline. Now we've got 2 more on the right hand side here. We've got outliner and we have properties. Now these icons themselves, if we click on them, they give us the option for all the other view types that we have in Blender. So you can go ahead and change those. You can even have 2 of the same if necessary. So later on in the course, I definitely need 2 of these property windows, for instance, because they've got all of these tabs going across the top. And occasionally I don't want to keep flicking backwards and forwards between 2. An example earlier on in the course, I might have 2 3D windows open, so I can move this one up here using this split between the 2, this horizontal line. There's also a vertical line that we can move to the left and right as well, and obviously change this bottom one to a 3D view, and then I can work on the same model from different angles or different viewpoints, which is very, very powerful. So I'll just pop that back to how it was, and we can have a look at some of the other features as well. Now we can resize those if we want to. We can grab this vertical line that splits the 2 windows up and move it from left to right. And you will find me doing that a lot in this course. I'm running at 720p so you guys can see what I'm doing with ease. Unfortunately, that gets a bit cramped on my particular screen. So I'm often moving things about, hiding them, etc., moving them backwards and forwards. So I will often hide this thing to one side and then pull it out again when I need to make some changes. I try and leave it static because obviously it takes up time moving things about. If you're working with a different monitor resolution, bear in mind I'm at 720p here. You could be at 4K, you know, or even 5K if you've got one of those 5K iMacs. So there's a vast array of sizes that we can work with in Blender. And of course, each one of us will have a slightly different layout, and we can customize this to our own desire. Now, one of the most important things is, before we start tweaking and moving things about, is that you're not working on the default layer. Otherwise, you can't get back to it easily. So looking at the header bar again, we can see here that it says default. That is the current view that we're working on. If I go to the drop down just to the left of the word default, we can see that there are a series here of predefined views. And if we go ahead and click on 3D full view, we can see that we've got a completely different view to what we had before. We can go to compositing, and that's a different type of workflow essentially, so it gives you some windows that are appropriate to that. We can go to, I've made a couple here as well, so we've got motion tracking as well. And to make something, you simply find something that is close, so we can go back to default here. We can find something that's close to what you want and hit the plus button. Once you hit that plus button, we've added a new screen, and we can name this whatever we like. So I can just call this layout. Now that we've changed it to layout, because that's what's selected at the top there, we can change everything on this screen to our heart's content without worrying about overwriting that default layout. Very, very powerful. Now you'll notice that each of these areas has a header bar, and every one of them, apart from the info window, has an actual window associated with that header. Now the info does actually have another window. If we click here, we see that we get this double-headed arrow with a line in between on this break between the two windows. And if I drag that down, we can see here it gives us almost like a console of what's happening in the background. Now often I will just hide that out of the way because it's not useful. However, bringing that down can help with some sort of diagnostics later on. But I'm going to now click and drag that back up and hide it out of the way. Now you can do that for all of the windows. You can resize them and move them about with ease. You can also hide and move things that are part of that window. So the typical one that I see a lot and gets people is the header bar. You can actually hide the header bar. So you think that you're moving these windows and resizing them, which is great, but you accidentally do this, and you can see instead of being at the bottom of the header bar here, I'm actually at the top of the header bar, and the arrow looks the same. So you quickly glance, you go, okay, I want to move. Oh, where has my header bar gone? Well, you can get it back. There's a little plus on the lower right hand side of that particular window, or the upper right hand side if you move the header to the top, and I'll show you that in a few moments. And if we click that plus, the header bar reappears. Now, if you are working with limited space, or you've changed the size of your windows here, we can help collapse these words, the menu options on any header bar, by right-clicking on the header bar and collapsing menus. It then appears as these three lines here that we can click on and get to the same options that we had before. So I'm going to undo that for the moment by right-clicking and undoing collapse menus. We've got flip to top, so we can actually put a header bar at the top of something, which is traditionally where header bars would be. They would be at the top rather than at the bottom. However, wherever you do choose to put your header bars, I wouldn't swap about too often. We tend to focus on where things are, not necessarily what they look like or what they've called. So if you go and move things about drastically, it can actually slow your production down quite a bit, because you're then having to relearn where things are. Now, we're going to focus on the 3D view briefly here, and I'm going to show you about the tool shelf, which is this area that's opened up on the left-hand side here, and on the right-hand side there is a properties panel. Now, we can resize those, and you may have to at any point, but of course, if you resize it and make it too small, it disappears. And there is a plus and another plus on the top left and right of any window that's got these tool shelves and properties panels. So in this particular case, I can make this bottom window larger and show you as well with a UV image editor. I know that that type of window actually has, oh, I missed a click there. No. That particular window also has a plus at the top left and right, which means it's got a tool shelf and a properties panel devoted to it. So we can click the pluses and make those appear. So there we go, tool shelf on the left hand side and the properties panel on the right. There's also a keyboard shortcut to do that, and with most keyboard shortcuts they apply to the window that your current cursor is over. So for instance, the tool shelf, the shortcut key is the letter T. So if we go ahead and press T whilst we're over the UV image editor, you can see that it's enabling the tool shelf on there. I'm just going to continue pressing T and move my cursor up to this window. I haven't clicked on anything, it's just where my cursor is, and a common mistake is you're trying to do an operation and your cursor has drifted off the window you're working on, and of course the keys you're pressing, and Blender is quite key heavy, you're not actually controlling the window you thought you were controlling. Now the properties side, you can control that with the N. Now depending on the screen space you have, you can obviously leave these open all the time. You'll find that I open and shut them quite a bit in order to give myself a bit more space so I can show you guys what I'm doing. But again, I'll try and minimize that as much as possible. So now we've had a brief layout overview, I'd like you to just play with it for a bit. So I've got a small challenge for you. Okay guys, I'd like you to play with the layout. Now of course, what I'd like you to do here is just make your own layout. Move the windows about, hide some header bars, just get used to the general feeling of what's going on. So alter it, change window types and sizes, and see how that all pans out. Now this may seem like a very, very simple task if you've used these sorts of applications before, but it's great to just ingrain that knowledge and make sure that you have it absolutely nailed. So pause the video now and give that a go. Okay guys, welcome back. So let's go and play with the layout over in Blender to just give you an idea of what we can do. Okay, so we're back over in Blender here, and so straight away we can play with the size of windows. Now, depending, as I say, on the screen that you've got, being able to take control and resize the windows that you have in front of you, or even hide certain parts of them, to give yourself more space is a great boon. We really want to be able to master this interface. We'll go over creating some new windows in the next lecture, but in this one I just want to take control and make sure make sure I have control over the basics. So I can hide those header bars. Now, some of these header bars, of course, if you go and hide them, you just cause yourself more grief. But in some cases, it's very easy to accidentally hide them, like you think you're moving one of these up and down and you don't, you do that. And it can also be very confusing, of course, if it looks something like this, where it looks like we've just got the one window here with a 3D view and a 3D header bar. But actually it's a 3D view without a header bar and a 3D view without a window, the actual 3D view itself. So that's one of those things that I have seen people have an issue with in the past. So it's great to make sure that you guys will not suffer the same fate if you accidentally hide your header bar there. Okay, brilliant. I hope you guys are getting the feel and the control of Blender's layout. And in the next lecture, we'll be going through how to master it and do the advanced controls on this layout as well. And then we've absolutely nailed the layout and we can start making some 3D models. So congratulations, guys, and I will see you in the next lecture.